What is really going on? Today, for the first time ever, I've got 8 different guests from across Ontario. We'll get an insider's viewpoint, and it all starts right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Usually on Debt Free in 30, we have one guest, we talk, we have a nice civilized conversation. But today, for the first time ever, it's a free-for-all. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see that I have 8 people on the call, plus myself. The screen looks like the opening for the Brady Bunch. Remember that show? That was a great show. My guests are all licensed insolvency trustees from across Ontario, from Windsor in the west to Ottawa region in the east, up north to Barrie, and everywhere in between. And today I have one simple question, and that is, what's going on? I want to hear from people on the ground, in the trenches, what's happening. We are recording this on Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. It's almost 2 years since the first pandemic lockdowns, and here we are 2 years later, and businesses like restaurants and gyms and hair salons are either closed or operating at reduced capacity. Debt levels are still high. The media has lots of stories about how either the average person is getting crushed by the pandemic or how the rich keep getting richer. So what is really happening? How is this impacting the average person? Well, let's find out. So the first question for the panel, and I'm going to do this from west to east geographically. I want a quick answer from each of you. And the question is, what's the general mood? What are you seeing? When people call the Hoyes Michaelis 310 plan helpline and you're at the other end and you pick it up, how are people feeling? How has it all changed in the last couple of years? What level of stress are they under? How are they managing the stress? So really what's happening? So let's start in Windsor. Rebecca Martin, tell us what you're seeing in Windsor.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm generally finding people I'm speaking with, they're stressed, they're frustrated. Windsor has a very vibrant entertainment center with a casino, with restaurants. They've been essentially shut down for 2 years. We are still very heavily automotive. The chip shortage seemed to hit Chrysler a little bit sooner than some of the other plants. So we're dealing with their lingering layoffs on, layoffs off, all the future plans, the difficulties. So we are stressed.
Joel Sandwich, you are in London, Ontario. Are you seeing that same level of stress?
Yeah, I think what I would say is I'm seeing a lot of people feeling like they're being left behind. So London area, like everywhere else, has had benefits of higher real estate values, unemployment has gone down, there's jobs available. But I think the other side of this, and the people that I'm talking to, is that it's moved people further away from the things they wanted. For example, buying a house if you're struggling with debt. Many of the jobs that are available aren't paying very well. They don't offer consistent hours. Sometimes they're in difficult conditions. And obviously, we're all seeing the cost of living is going up. So for a lot of the people that I'm talking with, their hope is diminished. Instead of seeing things getting better at some point, they seem to be aiming more at simple survival and just watching other people get richer.
Yeah, and that's a sad commentary, but I think that's something we're all seeing. People's hope is diminished. So, okay, let's turn out of the London office, go down the 401, hit Highway 24, turn right, and we hit Howard Hayes in Cambridge and Brantford. Howard, what are you seeing?
Hi, Doug. Yeah, I think I would just support what Joel said as well. I think there seems to be more of an attitude of instant defeat. Like we're getting more calls from people saying, I just want to go bankrupt. I think pre-pandemic, there were a lot of people contemplating something like a bankruptcy or proposal because they wanted to get ahead in life. They wanted, I want to do a proposal because I want to buy a house in the future. So they understood the first step was getting rid of their debts. However, now it just seems to be, I don't have any options. I just need to go bankrupt. In fact, I'm also seeing I've got 4 appointments this afternoon, and 3 of those are people that first initially contacted us a year ago. And I think there's a little bit of what's happened over time is I think initially when the pandemic started, I think people were trying to hang on, do whatever they could to fight the fight. Whereas now I think they're starting to get to that point where they're realizing that they've run out of options and they're having to turn towards something like a bankruptcy or proposal because of that defeat of, I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and that's an interesting insight into the psychology of what we're seeing. So let's go up to Barrie. Mark Borsiak, I believe this is your first appearance on the podcast. And for those watching on video, I guess you're in the center square. So that's either Paul Lind on Hollywood Squares or I think Alice the maid on the Brady Bunch. But so, Mark, what are you seeing in the snow capital of Ontario up in Barrie?
Thanks, Dad. Well, the same as everybody else, people are stressed. Barrie, the cost of living is going up, and one of the big issues up here is rent. The amount of clients I'm talking to that are experiencing rent increases are now having to find new rentals because their landlords are selling or causing a lot of additional stress. Combine that with the pandemic and increased cost of living, it's a lot of weight on people's shoulders and making things very difficult.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that discussion about real estate. Let's go out to Mississauga. Jennifer Kwan, returning to the podcast for, I don't know, the second or third time. What are you seeing just west of Toronto?
Thanks, Doug. So I've noticed that generally people are undergoing extreme COVID fatigue. So they've had enough, right? So I've had a number of clients waiting patiently to be reintegrated into their pre-existing employment. And then after 2 years, you're just like, wow, it's never happening. So they'll file, right? And in Mississauga, we have a lot of folks working in essential businesses like Costco or like bigger stores, and they've seen their hours being reduced due to capacity restrictions and things like that. So it's very difficult for them to keep up, coupled with, inflation and things going up in price. So yeah, they do have this defeatist attitude like my colleagues just mentioned, and it sucks to see that.
Yeah, and you got the pressure coming at you from both ends. It's like, well, I got my job pressure, and then I got the cost pressure, and it's like, I don't see any way out. So, Nicholas Toe, you are in Markham. You also cover our Scarborough office. So, Nick, what are you seeing? This something similar?
Yes, I agree with all the comments shared thus far. Clients that were doing fine pre-pandemic fell behind because they had reduced income, reduced hours, maybe they lost their second job, and they feel defeated because they were able to keep up with their debts on their own before. And because of things completely out of their control, they haven't been able to pick themselves back up like they used to. The good thing is that once they do reach out, they do realize they have options.
Yeah, and that's obviously why we're here. So let's go a little farther east out to Oshawa. Yana Ragimov, tell me how to pronounce your name in real life.
Oh, thanks, Doug. You got it. Yana Ragimov it is.
There you go. That's pretty good. So this is Nick's first appearance on the podcast, Mark's, and I believe this is your first appearance as well. So what is the general mood in the Oshawa area?
Well, I would say Oshawa is no different than the rest of the world we're seeing. People are stressed. One of the largest employers here is GM, but the people are still there waiting for the hours to be increased. Hours have been cut. The overtime is not happening. In addition, 2 casinos here in Durham region are closed, so people are unemployed. They're losing hope. So that's the general attitude we see.
Yeah, and obviously similar to what Rebecca said in Windsor, when you've got big employers like that, particularly in the casino industry, which you're seeing, which Rebecca's seeing in Windsor and Howard sees to a certain extent in Brantford as well, if that capacity is a lot lower, then people aren't getting the same number of hours. So Maureen, you get to end it. You've been on the podcast many times. What are you seeing in Canada and the Ottawa region in general?
Well, Ottawa is a government town, so it is a bit different because people have stayed employed, they're working from home. Obviously, Ottawa is more than just government. There are restaurants that have shut down. There are stores or people who aren't working. People are exhausted, as everyone's already said, and they're done. They just want to be done with the pandemic. They're done with dealing with debt stress, and they just want a fresh start. Unfortunately, like in Barrie, the prices in Ottawa are really high. People are selling their rental units in order to capitalize on that. And then people are forced to move, but they can't. Where can they move? Rent is high, buying another house. It's so hard. People are stuck and frustrated.
Yeah, and that's kind of the general mood. And obviously one of the factors in all this is the whole, vaccine booster thing. And there's lots of stories in the news about people, I'm not getting vaxxed, and as a result, they lose their job, particularly if they work in healthcare or some of those other industries. So I'd like to know from the panel, how common is that? And have you talked to people in that situation? And just to be clear here, This isn't a medical advice show. It's called Debt Free in 30. You know, it's available on YouTube and all podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. Please smash the like button and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. How is that for a commercial right in the middle there? So I'm not here to tell people whether they should get the vax or the booster or anything like that. I'm more interested in how is this impacting people and what's the potential impact on the economy going forward. So why don't I go back to you, Maureen, and what are you seeing on this topic?
I am seeing people who have not been vaccinated and they're calling in and they're saying, well, I can't get a job because I'm not vaccinated. So yeah, they're very stuck because they don't want to be vaccinated for whatever reason. Maybe medically they can't. It doesn't matter. They just can't get a job. They can't pay for the debts and they don't know where to turn.
What are you seeing, Nick?
Yeah, I agree. But also when you have a multi-generation household where maybe one or two members of the household is not vaxxed, which means that they may lose their job and the burden now becomes on the other members of the household to pick up the slack to contribute to household expenses. So it's not just an impact on the person who loses their job because they were unvaccinated, but it's also having an impact, making it harder for their family as well.
That's a good point, the ripple effect. Howard, what are you seeing?
Yeah, more of a thought really, that I wonder if there is going to be any correlation between people choosing to not get vaccinated versus their comfort with their financial security. Like the more comfortable you are, the easier it might be to make the decision that I don't want to get vaccinated, whereas someone who's really struggling and is desperate to find employment might feel that force to have to get vaccinated. It may be against their wishes in order to survive.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. I guess if you're about to retire, it's like, oh, well, I guess if I'm going to lose my job, I don't really care. But if you're younger and you need this job to survive, then maybe you're not comfortable with the vaccine, but I got to do it anyways because I got to eat. So it's an interesting dilemma for some people. Rebecca, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing the same as what the others have mentioned. I have a few clients who are in bankruptcy right now in healthcare, have lost their job because of their vaccination status. And the rules are changing so quickly. And I seem to recall that at some point, if you lost your job due to your vaccination status, you didn't qualify for EI. So what Howard said is right. You need to kind of sit back and look at your financial situation, figure out what's best for you and your family, make the decision that you need to make for yourself and just sort the rest out.
And I would caution everybody who's listening to this and who is throwing something at their screen right now. Most people are on one side or the other. I either believe everybody should get the vaccine and be thrown in jail if they don't, and then there's other people who are much more free choice. And it is a difficult decision for some people. I got a lot of clients in the Toronto area, particularly with all the hospitals right there on University Avenue. And I've talked to more than one person, quite a few, who said, yeah, you know what? I got COVID early on, and I know I'm pretty much as immune as anybody with the vaccine. I've seen too many stories about it and I'm just not getting it. And I've lost my job and now I can't pay my bills, but that's what I'm doing. So it's, I think, important to talk to someone on the other side of whatever the issue is so that you can see how other people are reacting to it. So, okay, that's the debtor side of things. Now I want to talk about creditors. So as everybody knows, we file a lot of consumer proposals, which of course is a deal we make with the creditors. So our typical client may have, $50,000 worth of unsecured debt, credit cards, payday loans, income taxes, whatever. Could be more, could be less. They can't pay it. So they come in and see us and we file a proposal, which might be them paying $300, $400, $500 a month, whatever it is. And then each creditor gets one vote for every dollar they're owed. And if the majority of the dollars vote yes, then the proposal is accepted and it's binding on everyone. So my question is, what are creditors doing? What are you seeing? Are they aggressive? Are they suing people? Are they relatively benign because we're in a pandemic? Are they willing to accept proposals? And how does this compare pre-pandemic? So Jennifer Kwan, I'd like to start with you. And I mean, as you know, because in your past life you were a lawyer, we don't mention that on the show because I don't want to embarrass you. You're reformed. when someone sues you, their goal is to get a garnishment. So what is a court-ordered garnishment, and are you seeing more or less of them these days?
Right. So I can't speak to how this compares to pre-pandemic because I joined Hoyts Michaelos during the pandemic.
He's just a kid.
I'm an odd one.
Just a kid,
yeah. So, yeah, and just to recap what a court garnishment is, it's very simple. Like, if a debtor stops paying his or her creditors, the creditor can seek a judgment order against that debtor, which could, in effect, lead to a garnishment. So, the wage garnishment essentially forces a third party, like the debtor's employer or the debtor's bank, to turn over to the creditor a portion of the debtor's wages or the funds held in the banking institution. So, in Ontario, the maximum amount that your wages can be garnished by a creditor through court order is 20% of your gross pay, which is before deductions, right, according to the Ontario Wages Act. But if you owe arrears to like a family responsibility office, the governing body that helps individuals collect child support, well, then you're kind of screwed. They can garnish up to 50% of your wages. So yeah, that's a recap.
And yeah, and so are you seeing them?
I'm actually seeing a lot more, especially in the months of December and January. I've had 5, I think, which is a lot more than I've had all year in 2021.
Interesting. I've got some theories on why that is. Nick, let me go over to you. The way we stop a garnishment, as you know, is we issue a stay of proceedings. So whenever a proposal or a bankruptcy is filed, we issue a stay of proceedings. So is your experience similar to Jennifer's? Are you issuing stay of proceedings these days? What are you seeing?
Yeah, last month in December alone, I filed 2 proposals where I had to issue stay of proceedings. One was to stop a wage garnishment. The other was to stop litigation that would likely result in wage garnishment or lien on his property. I'm happy to report that it looks like both will be approved. One has been approved and one looks like it will be approved. Compared to pre-pandemic, I think our office was issuing about 10 to 20 stay of proceeding notices daily. As one might expect, there was a long pause due to the pandemic, but it appears slowly things are getting started again. I would say we are at about 10% of pre-pandemic levels. One interesting note, the statement of claim must be properly served. This has likely made it more problematic due to the pandemic restrictions and social distancing. If creditors are unable to make proper service, I've seen that the court issue an order approving alternative service just via regular mail. So that's something that we may see more of.
Yeah, and I believe Ted and I talked about this on our year-end podcast, and I think we talked about it last week when we talked about old debts. The Limitations Act in Ontario says you got to sue someone within 2 years of when they stop paying, and I'm oversimplifying, so don't sue me if I've mischaracterized it. Well, the pandemic started almost 2 years ago. So I'm not totally shocked that you guys are seeing a bunch of activity picking up over the last month or two because creditors are realizing they are getting close to the line and perhaps they have to do something before time runs out. Does anyone else want to make a comment on that before I go to the next question?
I'll comment on that. What I was seeing near the end of the year was old judgments or old garnishments pre-pandemic, but weren't enforced, that were becoming enforced during 2021. So people had old debts that were popping back up throughout last year.
Yeah, good point. A judgment doesn't go away. So that 2-year limit is on when they can sue you. But once they've sued you and got a judgment, it stays there forever. Rebecca, any comments?
When you were talking about creditors suing proposals, we all have experience with one bank in particular who was extremely aggressive. There's been podcasts, blogs written about them. I'm finding that this one bank is as aggressive as ever. I'm getting very interesting notes back when they vote no on a proposal. I had one, they said that, and I think I'm basically quoting here, they've investigated the situation and believe he is living at home. What bank investigates someone to find out where they're living? And it turns out, no, he's not living at home. I've never had a bank before ask me to prove what a person's paying for rent, especially in today's environment with the rent prices the way they are.
Yeah, and we won't mention which bank that is, but if you DM me on Twitter, I will tell you their initials. Any other comments on that point?
Just on Rebecca's point there, I wonder if because there's been a general downturn in the number of overall insolvencies, some of the banks might have a little bit more time on their hands to actually spend a bit more time reviewing the proposals that we are filing in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I'm seeing most creditors are very reasonable these days. That would be my general comment. I think they realize that, hey, if we don't accept this proposal, the person goes bankrupt and we might get nothing. So I think they're being more reasonable than in the past, but obviously they're always outliers. Okay, so let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, the topic that always gets us the clicks. This is the clickbait topic. And in Canada, that is real estate. It's our national obsession. Obviously, house prices have been going up for years and years and years. And as a result, even if you have a bunch of credit card debt, well, my house went up by $100,000. I can refinance and I don't have to file a proposal or bankruptcy. And everybody who listens to this podcast knows that we create and publish every month the Hoyes Michaelis Homeowners Bankruptcy Index. I'll put a link in the show notes on YouTube. It hit an all-time low in September of 2021 at 0.4%, which means that less than half of 1% of our clients owned a home at the time they filed a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, basically zero. And the Hoyes Michaelis Homeowners Bankruptcy Index did spike all the way up to 3.9% in December. That's the highest level since May of 2021, but it's still far below the all-time high, which was way back in February of 2011, where about a third of our clients owned a home at the time they filed a bankruptcy or a proposal. Obviously, house prices were a lot lower then. They didn't have as much equity, so they could file a proposal, a bankruptcy, and not have to worry about serious repercussions on their house. So what are you seeing real estate wise? And in particular, are you getting phone calls from clients who own real estate but have a lot of unsecured debt? So Rebecca, why don't I go to you first on that one?
Well, and that's exactly what I'm dealing with. Windsor historically has always been a very affordable city. Now, past year, real estate prices in Windsor have gone up 31%. This might not seem like a high number for someone in Toronto, but the average home price in Windsor is $550,000+. But a 31% increase is huge. So you're dealing with a situation where someone might have, hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, I guess I should say, in their house because of the inflated home prices, $50,000, $60,000 worth of debt. Proposal, bankruptcy is not going to work. Proposal is really not going to work. They can't refinance because they have too much debt or because they're not working right now. So they're in this catch-22 situation. What do? They sell. Great. You've unlocked all this equity. You've paid off your debt. You can't find a place to rent because meanwhile, rent prices have gone up 15%. And even if you can find a place, you're going to burn through your equity in maybe a year. So what do?
Yeah, it's really difficult being in limbo land like that. There's no obvious correct solution. Jennifer, are you seeing something similar?
Exactly. Like, I just want to reiterate exactly what Rebecca said. Recently, I've had a number of consults and, they have substantial equity. I'm not talking about like 100,000. I'm talking multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, meaning they've probably purchased their homes years ago and, the value of the homes increased exponentially, but their income hasn't increased at the same way. They've racked up so much debt, but not enough debt to qualify as an insolvent person, because an insolvent person by definition means, if you sell all of your assets, if you don't have enough to pay your liabilities, then you're considered an insolvent person, right? So they are in this limbo where they can't get refinancing because they've lost their job or they're near retirement age. So they don't have a lot of options at that point.
Yeah, it's very difficult. So Yana, you're out in Oshawa, Durham region. A lot of people have fled Toronto to go to the cheaper land of the East. Are you seeing something similar out there?
Oh, absolutely. The only thing is it's not so much cheaper anymore as it used to be. Prices went up through the roof. Those who are able to refinance are definitely refinancing. However, it's becoming harder and harder to qualify to do that. And those who haven't got into the real estate market are really not hopeful they will ever be able to.
Yeah, it's kind of too late. So, okay, if I go out to Ottawa, Canada, all the surrounding areas, is everything perfect out there, Maureen?
Oh, absolutely.
That's
We're all
what I thought.
perfect here. Yeah. No, similar. Like in 2021, the prices were still increasing over 2020, which I wouldn't have thought possible. But because there's supply issues, there's still pressure on that upward trend for prices. So as my colleagues have pointed out, there is the limbo land that a lot of people are in, right? They cannot refinance because the income to debt ratio is too high. They can't file a bankruptcy. A proposal, doesn't really work as well if their budget doesn't allow for 100% proposal. And if they sell a house, where can they afford to buy? They're going to have to go outside the city, far outside the city, in order to do so, because rent is also high. It's a really tough situation.
They're kind of pooch. So Joel, you've been awfully quiet there, which means something is going on in your brain. I've known you for a decade or more. What's going through your brain right now?
Well, first off, I'll say the London area is the same as everybody else. We're getting an influx of people that I've looked at, say, Woodstock, and found that it's gone up too much, so they're moving even further west from Toronto. But I do have a couple of interesting stories. One of them is that part of the market that I serve is Sarnia, which is a wonderful place. And Sarnia is just far enough off the path that this contagion of high equity hasn't quite hit every part of that area. So I was actually able to help somebody with a proposal. You'd love for them to have an enormous amount of equity in their property, but they simply didn't. So they were still in a position to do something to save themselves a pile of money. And so what I would say from that perspective is, don't hesitate to call if you are struggling with the unsecured debt, because you never know. There is every possibility that something we can do will help. The second story is that, we talk about how everybody knows that real estate is the big topic. Well, it isn't for everybody. Some people don't pay attention to real estate pricing because they're in their home. They have no intention of moving. The price of real estate around them just doesn't make a difference to them until it does. And so I had a conversation with somebody a couple of months ago who thought their house was worth X number of dollars and had so much mortgage against it and all this other debt to deal with. Well, we started talking about it and we kind of looked into it a little bit. And it turns out their house, like everybody else's house, is worth $300,000 more than what it was 2 years ago. Well, they didn't know this. So the happy ending to this story is they didn't need us. They were still in a position where they could refinance that debt. And if they hadn't called us, they may not have realized that.
Yeah. And so when someone comes in and talks to us and they own a house, we say, well, let's get an appraisal. Talk to a real estate person. It doesn't have to be a full-blown appraisal, but get a comparative market assessment. Let's see what you're dealing with, because you're right. In a lot of cases, like, oh, wow, I got way more equity than I thought. I don't need to go bankrupt. I don't need to lose my house. I'm going to refinance. Maybe I'll sell it, go rent somewhere, but there are a lot more options. So excellent. And I guess the point we're making is that limbo land is really difficult. Rebecca and then Nicholas, I'll let you both finish up on this topic. Rebecca first.
Well, this is actually more of a question for Joel, something that might be interesting to see in Sarnia, because I experienced this in Windsor several years ago before house prices started going up. I found that some of the more aggressive creditors in Toronto would ask for the housing information because they couldn't believe that a house didn't have any equity. So I'm wondering if you're going to be finding that in Sarnia, where the big bank is going to have a hard time believing that a house is really worth, $200,000 with $150,000 equity. So that's going to be interesting to see. Sorry, $150,000 mortgage. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yep, I did have that happen once in Sarnia about 4 or 5 years ago. The particular story I was telling a moment ago, it didn't come up. It was accepted at the value that we had found through a realtor. So there wasn't an issue then, but absolutely, I can completely agree. This house was valued at $260,000. And I think there's probably people on our panel today that would think, what can you actually buy for $260,000? Well, it turns out to be a very nice house. It's just something people aren't moving to yet.
And I've been doing files in the way north. And, I talked to a guy last week who bought his place 3 years ago for $88,000. Now he's like north of Thunder Bay, but the numbers do fluctuate around. Nick, final word on real estate to you.
Yeah, so definitely real estate prices has gone up. But the challenge is sometimes they cannot obtain refinancing to obtain the equity to pay off their debts, but they are adamant that they don't want to sell because they realize once they sell, they cannot get back into the market. So sometimes what we can do is we can still make a proposal to creditors to pay less than the amount they owe. Maybe it requires the full amount, but it's an amount that they can afford to pay in the proposal, allowing to keep their house. And this is what I sometimes call the option of last resort. If you don't want to sell your property, you can't get refinancing, then maybe let's try the proposal first before creditors sue you, garnish your wages, put a lien on your property before you're ultimately forced to sell.
Yeah, house rich and cash poor is what we're seeing, right? I got equity in the house, but I can't finance it. Yana?
I just wanted to mirror what Nick just said. We see this a lot in Durham, where we file what we call 100% proposals because people don't have any other options. They're not able to refinance, and this is where a smaller payment for the time being up until they get back on their employment field or up until they're eligible and able to refinance. So when refinancing comes due, we offer that, and then the lump sum payment will come into play. We see a lot of these proposals and a lot of people being helped this way. This is a great resort.
Yeah, and I guess that's why Joel said, reach out. We can at least tell you if there's something we can do. So we are up against the clock here. We've already hit past the 30-minute mark. So I guess this show will be called Debt Free in 37 or something today. But I got two more questions. And the last major question, I'm just going to have Mark answer this question. And so if anyone else wants to chime in, then they can. But otherwise, Mark's going to get this one. And the question is taxes. So traditionally, about a third of our clients at the time they file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal owe money to CRA. But over the last couple of years, tax debts continued to go up. People owe money on CERB and CRB, and they haven't paid tax on that. But because most CRA agents are working from home, they have not had the heavy collection activity that we've seen in the past. Kind of hard to issue a requirement to pay notice because it's a piece of paper, put a lien on someone's house. And as a result, we have not seen the same level of pressure. So are you seeing the same thing? Do you expect that to change? Mark, you get the one and only word on this.
Well, actually, I did have a client who had a requirement to pay issued last year, which was the first one I've seen since the pandemic started, which was surprising. So it seems like CRA may be starting their collection actions or trying to start their collection actions back up. In terms of proposals, though, I have found that they have been more favorable to people's situations. So they are voting in favor, they are accepting the offers, and they are understanding people are under tough times and a lot of stress.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think in the last 6 months, CRA has been very reasonable. I think they've realized, hey, look, if we don't take the proposal, the person's going to go bankrupt and we're going to get next to nothing. So some kind of deal is better than nothing. So, okay, let's finish off by going around the room one final time for your final thoughts. So open forum, you can say whatever you want. Any insight or insights that you didn't get to mention, any points you want to emphasize, any advice you want to give for anybody who's struggling with debt. So let's do it in reverse order this time. I'm going to start in the East. Maureen Parent, Canada, Ottawa. What would you like to say to end the show?
Well, obviously, this pandemic has been tough mentally, emotionally, and physically on everyone. Add debt stress to that, and it can seem overwhelming. So I'd say if you have any questions on dealing with your debt, what to do next, call a licensed insolvency trustee and look at all your options because you never know what's out there. And once you have a solution, it takes a huge amount of stress off of you.
How much do you charge for that call, Maureen?
Nothing.
Because the
It's
law
free.
says we can't charge for that call. So if someone's charging you money to talk to you on the phone, then it's a scam. Yana, Oshawa, Durham region, how would you like to end the show?
Well, I would just like to mirror that the hardest part of this whole process when you realize you need help is to pick up the phone and call. We'll take care of the rest. There is no judgment. We see this day in and day out. This is what we do for a living. We're humans. We deal with same problems as you do, and we're living the same life that you do. So pick up a phone and call, and we'll take care of the rest. That's it.
Yeah, if you've got a sore tooth, you're not embarrassed to go to the dentist because he's going to judge you for your sore tooth. That's what they do for a living. They see it all day long. Nicholas Toe, Markham and Scarborough, what would you like to say?
It's never too early to seek advice. With knowledge and guidance, you might be able to take corrective action on your own. keeping money in your pocket is actually more important than a credit score, because you can't buy a home or retire just because you have a high score. You need to make a plan. You need to save for it. So reach out. Let's review your situation, and then we can make a plan for your future.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of credit scores. I believe, I think Jennifer and I actually spoke about that on a podcast in the past. Jennifer, what would you like to say?
We sure did. Yeah, just picking up the phone is the hardest part on your end. You know, there's no commitment. Just talk to us. Let us assess the situation, because apparently we're the debt experts here. So we would tell you if, it's not the right time to file. Like, we're not here just to, gain another file, right? Each and every one of you is important, and we will have a solution, whether it's with us or outside of our office. So just give us a call.
And that's a key point, because there's been a lot of times where we've said to people, look, you're not back to work yet. Your wages can't be garnished because you don't have any. Let's give it a month or two, see if you're back to work, and then make a decision.
Exactly.
Mark, up in Barrie, I can actually see the snow accumulating on your window. So what would you like to say?
I'm going to echo my colleagues here with the same advice, is that you do have options, and it's better to be proactive than reactive. So call. We're here to help. The amount of people I talk to who tell me they feel better just after having a half-hour phone call, knowing that they have options and there is a plan, you can get help.
Yeah, and you can talk to us on the phone. We can meet over Zoom. You don't have to trudge through the snow and miss time off work to get to us. We can get to you a lot quicker than that. Howard Hayes, Cambridge and Brantford. Tell me a story.
Yeah, I would also agree with what's been said. And I would also probably echo that to the people that filed proposals in 2017, 18, and 19 that are still in a proposal. 5 years is a long time when you're doing a proposal. And no doubt a lot of those people's circumstances have changed as well, that they entered into the proposal thinking that their life was going to look a particular way, and it might have changed now because of the pandemic. So I think it's also worth putting a shout out to listeners of the show that might be in an existing proposal. If you're struggling to pay your proposal, you talk to your trustee, whether it's through Hoyes Michaelis or your own trustee that you filed the proposal with, because there are options to deal with changes in circumstances when you're already in a proposal.
Excellent advice. Joel Sandwith, London, Sarnia, and all parts in between.
Yeah, so I don't really have anything spectacularly new to add to what everybody else's great advice has been. Don't wait. Reach out for some advice. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. We get that. We're going through it too. Every one of us on this panel is going through the exact same type of concern about what's going to happen next. And if part of your concern is your finances, give us a call. Let's chat about it. And let's see what we can figure out. It's sometimes with us and sometimes not, but we'll help you find the way.
Totally agree. Rebecca Martin in Windsor, you started the show, you get to end it.
Yeah, and I guess I can just kind of agree with everything my colleagues have said. I mean, being a border city, dealing with the economic, the financial, the emotional stress, talking to clients every day who haven't seen grandkids that are 20 kilometers away across the border. So you deal with that as well. You deal with the emotional impact. And you're right, if your finances are affected too, pick up the phone and call. And as you mentioned, Doug, just be careful when you're clicking on that Facebook ad. Make sure you're talking to someone who's licensed. If they ask for money to meet with you, you're talking to the wrong person. As Maureen mentioned, we talk to you for free. That's the rule. And let us just help you find the plan. And we'll all get through this.
Absolutely. Well, that is an excellent way to end the show. Thank you to all of my guests, all of whom are licensed trustees here at Hoyes Michaelis and Associates. We got other trustees too, but you're the guys who are here today. I will put links in the show notes on YouTube to the Hoyes Michaelis Homeowners Bankruptcy Index, to the Hoyes Michaelis Joe Debtor Bankruptcy Study, and I'll put links to all of the bios for all of my guests today with a link to their email, so you can email them if you've got any specific questions or if you'd like to have an initial consultation with them. And of course, it doesn't cost anything to do that. I agree with what all of my trustees have said. People are under a lot of stress. I'm kind of hoping there's a return to something close to normal at some point, but it is what it is. So we've got to get through it. I wanted to do this show today and have everybody on because I wanted to emphasize that you are not alone. We're all stressed out, but I do believe we will get through it. That's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button on YouTube or subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.